added to the agenda.
Under the new
You can't-
agenda.
CNET, staff, council. Okay. Well, I will call to order these, well, before we call to order, just to note, council did meet in executive session prior to this meeting. Now I will call to order public hearing 1, College Township budget. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay. So we have no public comments in person. Is there anyone online?
No one online tonight.
All right.
Mr. Chair, if you would prefer a quick presentation
Sure.
overview of the College Township budget, I could do that at this time.
Yeah, if you want to give us a quick summary.
All right, that's great. A number of you may have seen the presentation of the preliminary budget 20-plus days ago. This now basically, if you'll go to the next slide, Mike, is there have been no comments received to this point. To the best of my knowledge, there's been no potential changes that have been identified. Council will later this evening debate whether or not there's any modifications to make. But in terms of the budget that had been prepared and had been approved as a preliminary budget, where we stand right now and what would be ready for adoption is the following. Quick review out of 2023. We had no property tax increase last year. We had been very prudent fiscally in our COVID years, and we still have money remaining from the Federal American Recovery Plan funds that are available for our use as general revenue replacement. And you'll see those there. Again, in 2023, we did have healthcare increases. We have about 9.3%. That is something that we're continuing to deal with in 2024. I also mentioned that we had a very good year in terms of collection of revenues with respect to the Penn State impact fee and also with our real estate transfer tax, as well as a fairly significant bump in our zoning permit fees as well. So there has been quite a bit of activity, and I know that our senior support specialist for zoning would be able to attest to that. Processed over 980 permits this year, which is a record. So it was quite a busy year, and that is reflected here in the permit fees received. As far as major projects that were completed or advanced, we did complete and dedicate the Pike Street project this year. We did complete the Center Hills Village traffic calming project, and we also made substantial progress on the Dale Summit Area Plan and the form-based code development. So again, in 2023, here still, we had total budgeted expenditures of $11.4 million. Our projected expenditures as of the end of November, were about $9.8 million for the entire year, which basically means that we spent about $1.5 million, almost $1.6 million less than what we had originally anticipated. So on to the 2024 budget. Again, the good news is there is no real estate tax millage increase. It will remain at 6.1 mils, just as it was in 2023 for 2024. There has been, and usually is, a little bit of modification and movement of individual millages across our funds that we work with. In this particular case, there was no change to the general fund millage. There was no change to the fire protection millage or to road machinery. However, we did add 7/100ths of a mil, I believe that says, I can't see that, Mike. What's that say?
1.17.
0.17. Okay, so, I'm sorry. So, almost 2/10 of a mil to the Parks and Recreation millage. Library, we added a little bit of millage to that. And we took away, in order to make those modifications, we took away from our debt service. And we were able to do that because our debt service is based now on a drawdown loan. And so we are seeing some significant savings there based on the number of projects that we've been able to complete and the need for us to defer actual drawdown of that money. So, in terms of our funding sources, you can see here we will be anticipating collecting about $2.9 million in property taxes. Let's see, about $3.5 million in enabling tax, in our total enabling taxes, which are EIT, LST, those types of things, including property transfer tax. We have access to about $500,000 in long-term debt. Intergovernmental transfers about $1.5 million, and our charges for fees and services about $700,000. So we're projecting, with all of our other sources of income, we're projecting total revenues at about $10.2 million for 2024. As far as spending is concerned, one of our bigger categories of expenditures are police hours. That totals about $1.67 million. We have debt service of another almost $600,000. Capital projects, we're anticipating expenditure of about $3.5 million in 2024. Our Central Region COG expenditures actually are up about 12.2% over last year, and that is reflected in the $1.65 million. Thank you, Mike. Yeah, it's a little glare right here, so I appreciate the help. And payroll and benefits are going to equal about just under $3 million for the 33 full-time employees that are presently on board. So all of our other spending, including IT, utilities, et cetera, that brings our total spending plan to just under $12 million, 11.97. Yeah.
Just one note, under payroll and benefits, it lists 2 full-time employees in public works or positions that are currently vacant. We're now down to 1, the building tech position here, but we just recently have added the 2 other positions, so we're making progress.
Thank you. Very good. Next slide. So some of the significant capital projects that we plan to undertake in 2024 through this budget, we have a variety of equipment replacements, $291,000, a little over $500,000 in road projects that we're going to be undertaking. We have some significant work with our signals and signage. Most of that is signal work. The vast majority of that is signal work, $892,000. Fun fact, we have 28 or 29, depending on how it's counted, signals in College Township that we are responsible for the maintenance and upkeep thereof. And each one of those signals on a 7 to 10 to 12-year time frame rotates. Signal cabinets need to be rebuilt. New electronics need to be added. So it's a ever-increasing line item for College Township, and it's a real task to keep up. So it's a significant expenditure that the township makes with respect to traffic signals. About $161,000 in buildings and grounds, stormwater. You're looking at $1.2 million there, but that also happens to include the other, and the other in this case is the $822,000 turn back portion of the Pike Street project. So if you want to think of, we've completed phase 1 and phase 2, and we've dedicated that work. There is a phase 3 of Pike Street, and that is from Dale Street to the intersection with College Avenue, that will be brought up to current PennDOT standards and will allow for PennDOT, for the township to take that over from PennDOT. Any comments, quotes?
No, you nailed it.
Okay, right answer. Thank you, Dawn. All right. And then, of course, we have about a little over $200,000 that does not include the COG contributions of our own College Township Park and Recreation expenditures. So, that is the total. So you have roughly around $11 million in revenue. And what was our total expenditures again, Mike? About I have it backwards. $10.2 million in revenue and almost $12 million in expenditures. There are no tax increases. That difference between our revenue in versus our expenditure outs are all made up through our fund balance and from the savings that we previously talked about in 2023, that $1.5 million that we did not expend for projected expenditures in 2023. So that is a very quick overview of the budget. And as we enter into the agenda item, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them at that time.
Council, any comments? Nope. Okay. Entertain a motion to close out the hearing.
So moved.
All right, we are adjourned. All right, well, I will call to order now this College Township regular meeting for council. And we'll move to public open discussion. If there's any members of the public online or present, please come to the lectern, and we'll limit your comments to 5 minutes. I don't see anyone.
No one online either.
Okay. All right, so new agenda items. Does anybody wish to add an agenda item?
Mr. Chair, I'd ask if we could add the December 21st, 2023 support letter for the redevelopment assistance capital program funding request to the consent agenda.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, none opposed. So we see A3 now, the support letter. See A3A. Okay, moving on to special presentations. Ms. Carrie Miller, Executive Director of the College Township IDA.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here tonight, Council. I'll set my alarm for 1 hour and make sure I try and keep it to that, but
right.
no promises.
CNET, you got that?
1 hour. It's for Cindy. All for Cindy.
Yeah, again, thanks for having me, giving me the opportunity to go over kind of what we've been doing. I'll only touch a little bit into the recent past, what we're working on now, and what we're looking towards in the future. If you have any questions really about the institutional knowledge or history, I'm sure Anthony would be happy to give you some more information on that. So first in the presentation is the mission and vision that we have. I'm not going to read it word for word because you have it in front of you. But the key is that we work to promote a vibrant, diversified, and sustainable economy. And that's through supporting and encouraging job growth and investment of capital into our community. And then we have objectives that support that, and you can read those as well. But to achieve the mission and vision, we assist in facilitating business development, accessible to identify and mitigate obstacles for businesses, provide financial assistance, provide guidance and resources, and maintain vital stakeholder relationships with elected officials such as yourselves here tonight. You'll see that these are interwoven throughout the presentation. But as we look at how the IDA can do all of these things identified as objectives, we really see an overarching theme here, and it's relationship building. So the 3 COGs, not to be associated with the COG, are that the COGs need to be functioning well for effective economic development collaboration. And those are the IDA board itself, economic development allies, and business partners. So my time here has been really evaluating and fostering these relationships, and that's been my focus for the last 3 months that I've had the opportunity to serve with the IDA here. So the first one was the IDA board itself. So first the board members, they're listed there. Those are the current board members. There were others who were on the board earlier in the year that have moved off. And we also have 3 vacancies, but as you guys had earlier, there are candidates who are looking to come on and join our board. So 2 that you were aware of, and 1 that just put in their application here recently. So hopefully that'll get before you in the near future, and in 2024, we'll really start out strong with a full board of 9 members. So then, in terms of internal organization, really to be effective, we have to have our own house in order. I mean, that's, you know, how a lot of organizations really need to focus and make sure that they're operating well so that they can serve in the communities well. So internally, as we're looking at past, present, and future, for the past, we look back and we learn from and move forward. So there's been a lot of great work done since the 1970s when the IDA was first created and established. But as things change and economic development changes, so does the board. So we identified some issues with some communication, structure, and direction that we really wanted to identify those challenges and see how we can move forward there. You guys contracted the IDA contracted with the township then for Adams services, and then they looked for bringing on an executive director. And so while I'm the College Township Economic Development Coordinator, the IDA contracts my services then to be the executive director for the IDA. So after that, they've established during Adams' time 4 committees, the governance, loan, finance, and marketing committees, and each one of them has their own roles that they play in really moving forward with getting new business partners. So presently, we're working on clear and consistent lines of communication and document organization, really looking at how we're keeping records within the IDA and making sure that they're complete and accurate. Establishing policies such as loan qualification, investment policy, and risk policy, so that when we do have potential business partners come in, we can really make sure that we're going to work best for them and that our services are really meeting the needs of as many people, businesses in the community as we can. So loan administration is another thing we're working on. We have 2 direct loans out of our 6 total that we currently have. And that is really sending out invoices to these businesses to make sure that we're in good communication with them and when they need to make payments, and that we're not just kind of leaving them out there to dry. Another thing that we're working on is timelines of doing things. So there's been a budget, but it's been loose of when it's been created or how it's been established. And so we really worked in these last couple months to make sure that going into 2024, we have a set budget that's been approved at our last meeting and a budget narrative that accompanies that. So the budget narrative really goes into a lot of what we're looking at moving forward. So if any of you are interested in that, looking at the budget and the budget narrative, I'm sure that we can make sure that it gets to you. And then along with the creation of the budget and budget narrative, we start looking into strategic planning. So instead of just going by what's always been done or how different programs are run, we really want to look at what does the IDA want to accomplish and how do we get there. And so with the board's input in early 2024, we're going to be establishing that strategic plan. And then focusing on outreach, and you'll see in this slide here some of the outreach we're doing. And then as we look in the future, it's to have a sustainable organization that has the greatest impact in our community. So these 2 items here for outreach, they're 2 examples of what we've been working on. The IDA now has a LinkedIn page, so if you are on LinkedIn and you have not already, I encourage you to find us and get connected with that. We try and post a lot of what's going on with our business partners and things that they have going on, as well as some of the different meetings that we have. And then RAC cards, the chair of marketing, Ray Liddick, created the RAC cards for us here. And so on the back, there's a QR code that when we hand these out, instead of having too much information that may be outdated very early on, it now just has a QR code that scans to the website. And so once we have the website updated, there will be lots of great information that people will just be redirected there so that that can stay up to date and not be too static. So I have some of those that are also down in the library downstairs. So if you ever want to grab a few or you know any businesses that you want to hand those out to, please feel free to do so. So then after the IDA board itself and our internal organization, we look at reaching out to our economic development allies. So in relation to that outreach, we're developing and fostering an incredible network of economic development allies. And what we're working on now is charting and mapping the ecosystem that supports businesses from their inception. So we've kind of come up with a mantra of start here, grow here, stay here. And the IDA is working on creating touch points at each one of those steps. So while generally we've been involved at the stay here, maybe in between the grow here, stay here, we're looking at how we can get connected from the beginning with the start here, whether it's with the launch box, Invent Penn State, things like that, that we can do these micro grants that get our name out there and associated early on, so that as these businesses are growing and developing, they'll want to stay here because we've established that strong relationship and that support that they've had this whole time. And so naturally, they would continue getting the support if they chose to keep their businesses here. So that's the idea behind that. There's been significant change and rebuilding and restructuring throughout this network. A lot of new faces coming on in these organizations. The CBICC brought in Todd Dolben for their VP of Economic Development. Ben Franklin Technology Partners has had Todd Erdley come in and be the head there. So we're really seeing a lot of new excitement, new life, and new ideas in regard to economic development in Center County. So it's really exciting. And then the third and not least, is our business partners. They're really the reason behind the existence of the IDA. So we're working on becoming more than just people who sign over a check and then just expect a return on that. We're becoming truly invested through sincere relationship building, communication, and support with these businesses. Actually, it was within a month of coming in here, we had a grand opening. We solved some problems that were looking like they were going to be matters of litigation, and so we kind of were able to solve that and really build a better relationship there with the company. We had a new company come on that needed quick access to money, and the IDA was able to come in and really work with them. So we had a very busy fall after coming on. So those are just a few of the pictures from that. We have 6 current business partners, 4 of which are partnership loans with the chamber, 2 of which are direct loans. So we have Actuated Medical, Abington Equine, Dominite, and Exact Metal are our partnership loans with the chamber. And then we have Tasty K and XHAB, who were new, and they are our direct loans with them. Some things that we're working on in the future is that we're going to track some data in terms of diversity. You know, we need diversity on the board, but also looking at the diversity of the businesses we have. We actually have 4 minority businesses, 2 of which are women-owned businesses. One is Korean American and another Hispanic. So really focusing on how the IDA can benefit these minority-owned businesses as well. So that is all I have. Again, we're looking at a vibrant, diversified, and sustainable economy, and really that is in partnership with the work that you guys are doing too. So, do you guys have any questions for me?
Yeah, excellent, thank you. I will start out with our one IDA member and then our liaison. How about that?
Thank you, Carrie. All I can say is wow. I think when the IDA, if we say we learned from the past, and as we progress and move forward, I'll put an IDA hat on briefly. I want to thank the municipality and council for assisting in some of the issues that the IDA had, and then to go forward, partnering with us to provide executive director services. Carrie's been phenomenal. She's been doing a lot of deep dives into a variety of information and helping us progress, build structure. Adam was great. Carrie's phenomenal. But at the end of the day, I think as we progress, the College Township Industrial Development Authority will no longer have been or will have been the best kept secret. Its inception in 1972 and what they've done throughout the years. And there may have been a little hiccup, if you will, but I think as we progress, we're moving on. So thank you. And thanks, Carrie.
Thank you. Susan?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, Carrie. And to echo Anthony, wow. I've served for a short time, just part of the year, as the liaison. And in that short period of time, I've seen the IDA go from a passionate group of people working on committees to, the beginning of a, well-oiled and organized authority that'll be able to make some big changes in the region. And I've been really interested in the work that you're doing because I can see the opportunity to grow business, and this comes along at the same time that we're doing work on revitalizing the Dale Summit area. So I think a lot of things are coming together, and the IDA has done a wonderful job, and also in partnering with you and bringing you on and the work that you've done. So thank you all for the work you've done, including you, our IDA member.
Eric?
Yeah, two things quick. Compared to where we were, Adam's phenomenal.
Thank you,
Where we
Eric.
came from. Those were some painful meetings. But Carrie and I guess Anthony, reading the objectives, the first bullet item must be really important because it's actually repeated twice there. But it says assist in planning, funding, and development of, among other things, infrastructure. Something I may be coming back to the IDA for in the 2024 is I'm the College Township rep on the MPO, and the MPO is the countywide body that determines what we spend our federal transportation dollars on. So we maintain a 12-year list of projects and a 4-year list, and on the 4-year list is what we have the money for. Out there on the 12-year plan has been this airport connector road. It's been on there for about 15 or 20 years. It's never made it onto the 4-year plan because there's never really been that strong of a push for it. There has been some conversation of recent that needs to be a higher priority. So I would be interested, and in order for it to be a higher priority, there needs, and this is a road that exists in College Township, most of it, much of it, at least some of it. But it obviously would have some, I think, at least some interest to the IDA as far as planning and funding infrastructure. The best way to get these projects from the 12-year plan to the 4-year plan is to do a planning study that does kind of an assessment and vets the challenges. It's like a preliminary to preliminary engineering. So I would be interested in whether the IDA sees value in that, and potentially, maybe it's more of a chamber issue, potentially as a partner with College Township, if they see the value in it, and investing in some preliminary planning to vet the inherent issues with the design of the road.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Not an answer for tonight, but just something to think about.
Anything else? Rich?
No, I agree with, from whence we came to where we are and where we're headed is pretty exciting. So
Do you agree with the phenomenal comment about Adam? Probably not. You wouldn't go that far.
he has to get out the door.
It is award-winning.
I was just going to say, he's an award winner.
Potential award-winning.
He's an award winner.
Potential award-winning, but no, it's, he looks less stressed,
He could
so.
almost win like the governor's award for
Stop. You're just as bad.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah,
Could be a two-time
no.
winner.
Very excited about the future. Thank you for being a part of the team.
Thank you. Thanks for having
Well,
me.
thank you for a wonderful presentation and, sharing with our public too, where the IDA is going. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Karen.
Okay. Moving on to reports. No plans tonight, right?
No plans.
All right, reports, manager's update.
Yeah, quickly touch on a few of our holdover items, and then I will give you a very quick update about a new item that does not appear on the report. But with respect to the Dale Summit Area Plan, we're going to be talking a little bit about tonight relative to our next steps and where we're headed with that, and so stay tuned. We'll be covering that here shortly. And basically, the update that I have on solar power purchasing agreement is that there was a meeting that was held on the 13th. And they actually were able to provide some numbers, some detail that was part of the actual manager's update, kind of as an addendum. Mike has been spearheading that for us, and Mike, if you wanted to make any comment on this, maybe just a real brief overview of what the
Just save it for
supporting
your report,
documentation is. High-level overview.
High level.
Assistant manager's report.
Assistant manager's report, yeah, we'll just jump right over there. Actually, this fact sheet that Pam Adams and the team provided is a very good kind of Cliff Notes version of where we stand currently with the solar power purchasing agreement. One of the important things, two important things. First page, you see 5 numbers. There are actually 5 individual agreements that make up this power purchasing agreement. So it's a complex layered approach of agreements that they are getting near the finish line in terms of legal review on. But just bear in mind, when those come before you, it's going to be a pretty comprehensive review effort. One thing I did want to point out to the second page is this is the first that we have seen, and it's this bar chart. This is the first that we have seen actual true numbers attached to the power purchasing agreement. These are still a work in progress, but it gives some indication of what we may be potentially looking at under this agreement. Right now, when you factor in all of the rates, the fees, and the settlement costs, you're looking at a per kilowatt hour rate that is very comparable to what we just signed with Constellation, just under 7 cents per kilowatt hour. And you see some potential for growth of that over the 15-year lifespan of the agreement itself. But this is the first time they've attached some real numbers, and this is coming directly out of the agreement itself. I won't go into the key points, but I encourage you to take a little bit of time with this document. As I said, it's a really good kind of Cliff Notes version. In terms of the schedule itself, where we're at with the working group is we're looking at a review of all of the contracts near the end of January. January 24th is the projected date. Once the working group has a chance to go through those, ask their questions, and get some answers, in February, it will most likely be the point where you get the head nod out of the working group to send the contracts on to each of the partners and governing bodies, as it would be, with a look towards March for the councils to have some discussions. Certainly at that point, what I would encourage and what I would plan to do is ask that some of the project management team, Pam and others that are a little bit closer to this than I have been on the working group, to come in and help answer some of those in the weeds types questions. Ultimately, they're aiming for an April of next year goal for signing of the agreement. So, early 2024 could be a pretty busy and in-depth discussion on this agreement. But I do encourage you to take some time with this sheet. I know that one of the things that Pam and her group are working on as well, there's some learn and lunch, or lunch and learn scenarios where you have an opportunity to come in and kind of take this in incremental steps and learn about the complexities of the purchasing agreement and what it maybe means for the municipality and each of the member organizations. So again, good piece of information there, and certainly once you've had a chance to review it, we'll have some more discussions about it as we roll into the new year.
Excellent.
Thank you, Mike. A couple of other items that don't appear on the actual manager's update. Today, Dawn Franson, Township Engineer, and myself had an opportunity to attend a meeting that was organized by Representatives Takac and Benninghoff with PennDOT officials, as well as a few other folks, Jim Saylor from the MPO, Rob Watts with McCormick Taylor, as well as some individual private sector consulting firms to talk about the 2 corridors of interest in Center County right now, one being the Shiloh Road corridor and the other being the Benner Pike corridor, in terms of the amount of development that is occurring or proposed to be occurring here in the recent future, or the near future, I should say. and what we can do to best coordinate efforts there in terms of infrastructure improvements. For example, we know that based on the sketch plan review that we've recently completed with the property on what will be or become East Trout Road, and the proposed hotel there, that would most certainly trigger a signal warrant for this long proposed signal at Trout and Shiloh Road. And there are other developments in that particular corridor along Shiloh Road that could trigger even more signalization. And so this was an effort to begin a conversation to discuss how we may in fact be able to better coordinate that, bring some resources to bear, and we'll see where that goes and if that bears fruit. But I think, and Don can speak for himself, but I thought generally it was a positive meeting. I think it was a sense of, to some degree, urgency, because some of these things are happening now, will be happening in the very near future, but also not only along Shiloh Road, but also on the Benner Pike. There are some significant challenges, and I thought it was a good meeting, and there was a lot of goodwill amongst the parties that were represented to try to find some real-time, real-life solutions there. So stay tuned. We'll continue to report back. Don, was there anything more that?
No, just the State Secretary of Transportation seemed very much involved in wanting to help get things moving.
It was a very good meeting. And on a final note, and a very positive note, recently the awards from the Commonwealth Finance Agency for release of water and sewer infrastructure funds, that are basically COVID relief funds, awards were made by the Commonwealth Finance Agency, the CFA. For the first time in its history, the College Township Water Authority received $1,151,000 toward the construction of the Oak Hall Park well, our OH20. And we also received $208,000 for line renewal work that we have had scheduled for First Avenue. That's about half the overall amounts. It's about a third of the cost that is anticipated for the overall development of the Oak Hall Park well, and it's about half the cost, roughly, of what we anticipate the First Avenue renewal work to be. But our thanks to Representative Takak for helping to advance our cause and our application in the process. Very pleased, and again, it marks the very first time in its 27-year history that the College Township Water Authority has received a single dime in grant money from anybody. So this has been a bootstrap operation for 27 years. I think overall the Water Authority has done a very effective job. Your predecessors on council are to be complimented for the vision in terms of putting it in place. The staff has been great. Amy's here tonight. She does a phenomenal job with operations. We have other members of staff that work very diligently in this regard. Also want to give a quick shout out to the Water Authority's engineering firm, which is Entech Engineering, who actually assisted in putting together the grant application. So it's a bit of a red letter day for College Township Water Authority. Unfortunately, even though the CFA made the announcements 2 days ago, the press releases that coincided with that have gone nowhere yet. So many of you will be hearing about this for the first time this evening. But look forward. I'm sure it'll be coming out in your local press of choice soon. So that's everything. Thank you.
Very good news. Questions for the manager or comments? Just, yeah, Rich.
One to, through Adam to Mike. I note the solar purchase PPA folks were offering $60,000 towards the project costs.
Right.
Was that expected?
The $60,000 was negotiated. Because of the extent of the legal
Right.
review,
Right.
they worked closely with the one of the partners there to negotiate 60,000, basically as a clawback of funds to each of the partners to help offset some of those legal
No,
fees.
that's great. That's great. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, so move on to COG Regional County and Liaison Reports. Did anyone have any meetings? Anthony, do you wish to report anything?
Climate action did not meet.
Susan?
Public safety did not meet, and Carrie gave the IDA presentation tonight.
Perfect. Eric?
None of mine met, but I did meet as MPO rep with Senator Dush's staff Tuesday and MPO staff,
Okay.
kind of along the same lines as Adam's meeting. Only this was initiated by Senator Dush's staff. Many of you know that we are in his senatorial district now as a result of redistricting. Part of the center region is in his, including College Township. And the staff wanted to get familiar with the issues surrounding the State College Area Connector project and just a little bit more detail on some of the projects that we have on the tip in Bellefonte at State College Borough. So it was kind of a meet and greet info update. To be honest, though, I believe Senator Dush's office is getting some pushback from residents in Center County about the State College Area Connector project, just reading between the lines, based on the questions that were asked at the meeting. So I think the senator's staff is trying to gather as much information and data on the project as possible so as to know how to respond accordingly.
Okay. Rich?
Yes, I did have a meeting. Finance met on December 14th. I will offer that that was chaired by Mr. Bud Graham as his last public meeting after 30-plus years of service to the center region. Items under there, when we recommended the summary budget to the general forum, we had sent some calls to action along with it for assistance from entities outside of the Finance Committee's purview in resolving some issues that we experienced during the 2024 budget cycle. Those recommendations were remanded back by the Executive Committee to the Finance Committee, and at our meeting, we reviewed and approved a document which offered a situation, concern, and action requested for each of the items and everything, and we forwarded that back to the Exec Committee. My understanding is that didn't get initiated at the December meeting. I'm hoping with some further discussion that those move forward in January. The next item was, the key reason for this meeting was the after-action review for the 2024 budget process. Staff provided a laundry list of internal things that they had captured through their work through it, in particular because we had a brand-new finance director, so it had a fresh set of eyes and was looking at things a little bit different, along with all the different new agency directors. And now they did a good job of capturing the trials and tribulations of the 24 budget cycle. To that, the Finance Committee added their own takes and everything. Very healthy discussion. I think the new finance director came away energized and prepared to start right back in on the 2025 budget cycle, because that's what we do.
We did attend one other meeting, you and I,
We did? Okay.
Harris Township.
Yes, we did. That goes in line with, Mr. Bernier and I attended the Harris Township meeting on December,
Monday night,
the Monday before that.
yeah, a week ago Monday.
Yeah, and said our salutes to Mr. Graham.
Yeah, so we had the executive committee meeting on the 14th, and yeah, we'll add, it was a pretty light agenda, mostly because we had a lengthy executive session move into prior to that. Obviously, as you know, we did not have general forum, so that was one of the actions taken. And as Rich had noted, we did not move really far forward on the finance committee's suggestions and recommendations, and that'll essentially almost, will come back up again here in our next executive meeting. But that was all that I had. Anybody have any questions for me? Okay. All right, moving on, PC, Bob Hoffman, anything to report?
Well, have you received our input from the last meeting? The letter, the minutes?
Yes, yes.
Any questions about that?
I think we're gonna discuss that this evening, yeah, as an agenda item, yeah. So, I mean,
Okay.
if you could, yeah.
Other than that, if that's the case, then,
Well, that's the thing we just got yesterday or the day before.
and-
yeah, I just submitted it, was it Monday or maybe Friday?
Right, PC met on Tuesday, and in order to try to accommodate Bob's report to council, we did include that, it probably went in supplemental.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, it was emailed out and through supplemental on Wednesday. As soon as we got it, we put it out
so
there.
it is of recent vintage, but it was generated from the Tuesday night meeting.
Yes, exactly. I think, I don't know if you've had a chance to read it, but the essence was we had a fairly lively hour-and-a-half discussion with some pretty hard-hitting comments back to staff. What I wrote is fairly stern because I did it the night of the meeting and I probably should have waited in the morning, but to synthesize it and get it down to really what we are asking is we think that the schedule for the form-based is a little aggressive. We think that it started out being perhaps early January, maybe at the end of January. And I believe that it was a unanimous decision by the Planning Commission to take workforce housing first. That was our first charge. We haven't completed that. I think under QB3, we're going to discuss some of the questions that we had. However, we think that we ought to separate those workforce housing and then go into the form-based because of the kind of the intensity of each of these. We're taking that very seriously about looking at workforce housing. There's some questions that we have. We're asked to edit the present ordinance, but I think in line with that, rather than just adding words or critiquing redundant statements, we want to put some more thought into the criteria that we use for workforce housing. What are the incentives? What can we do to get it from an academic exercise into footprint on the ground reality in terms of developers and bankers? So that really is the essence of this report.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Hoffman? Anyone?
No, I
No.
don't.
I have some comments, maybe
Yeah.
some thoughts. I think we're gonna probably talk about it a little bit more to answer those questions when we get into OB 3 and 4, based on your report, but having watched the meeting as well, I'm just a little puzzled, one, from having watched the meeting and some of the questions that were thrown out there, the information that was provided, and then I'll say the division, with Planning Commission came with consensus in the sense of looking at workforce housing first and then form-based code. But my comments are more directed towards the discussion that entailed, having a joint PC council meeting, having sat on one previously, and then a remand letter and going through in those discussions. I guess I'll state it now. I'm just puzzled, Bob, only in the sense that, and I've sat on PC with you, and I know we can have differences in opinion, and we've always been mindful of each other and so forth with reference to that. But when you have a PC member that starts out the meeting that says, are we gonna talk about this form-based code crap? You're really not entertaining a dialogue to say, okay, let me hear what you have to say, let me review what you have to say, and maybe find a compromise, maybe find a solution, maybe work towards that. That pretty much suggests, I don't want to hear anything because I already have that. And that set the stage for the rest of the meeting, unfortunately. And I know it wasn't your words, from that standpoint, but it really set the stage. And it's unfortunate because the hour-and-a-half meeting, it went almost like in a circle, if you will. It just circled around numerous times. But there was really no entertaining of information to be provided, whether it be from staff, whether it be more information to gather from council, if you will, from their remand letter. It was just objection after objection after objection to not really want to look into this. But then it went into the separation of the two, whether it was workforce housing and, form-based code discussion, if you will. You sat on PC long enough to know that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. So sometimes you got to look at a couple things at once. Council does it. You're familiar with that? How often?
I am,
And the
Anthony.
discussion from a 50-page to 75-page document, the timing of the holidays and so forth. Hey, we're all volunteers, and and thank you. Again, we just had a dinner to thank for your time and trying to expend that effort in there. But again, we may come, and I'll raise my hand. I may come into a meeting with a slight bias from having read the packet and the material and so forth, but I like to listen as well. Because there may be something I missed, or maybe my bias just put me somewhere. But that one comment really struck me, because when I sat at the joint PC meeting, and I jokingly say, fortunately, it wasn't a Festivus to throw out the grievances, but it was almost there. It really set the stage for PC to really just say this. Whether it was a council remand letter or the information
Well,
staff provided.
I think that one thing I must emphasize, that we have a diverse group, as I can politely say. And I don't know that some of what you're saying was the PC so much as some particular people on the PC had some language pretty hard on staff about the situation. As far as timing, I have to agree. I would like to look at workforce housing separately, because as you understand and agree, it's a critically important component. And we're being asked to look at the ordinance. We have some really interesting questions about occupancy and some of the design. And so I think flushing that out may only take one meeting, but at least we would like to start with what we were initially asked to do, and that was the workforce housing. I think getting a 50-page report tomorrow over the holidays, yeah, we all read, we all travel, we all do things. I think, Lindsay, to you tried to get a schedule going that was aggressive in the sense of trying to do it in early January. We said maybe late January or February would be the best time. We can do two things at once. And there is some relationship from one to the other, definitely. But I think that we need to answer some of these questions under QB3 for us to even start our comments on the workforce housing. Anthony, I appreciate, you're a planning commission route. We've been on together, and I appreciate your comments. It was a tough meeting. It was a tough meeting to sit through. Period.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments for Bob? Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
Okay, and anything else from staff or other committee reports? Okay. DEIB reports.
Sure, just a couple notes. Obviously, we are approaching the Christmas and New Year's holiday, but I also want to make note that a number of our friends and neighbors here throughout the community will also be celebrating Kwanzaa, starting December 26th through January 1st.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. This evening's consent agenda consists of CA1, which is the approval of the December 6th regular meeting minutes. CA2A will be email from Daniel Materna dated December 5th, 2023 regarding the casino. B is a letter from Glow Fiber dated December 4th regarding rate adjustments. C is an email from Center Documenters dated December 10th regarding nationwide documenters program. And D is a letter from the Center Region COG dated December 11th regarding the 2024 COG committee appointments. CA3A, as well as a support letter from the RACP grant request for Clearwater Conservancy Community Center. Do any members of council wish to pull any of these items? All right, hearing none, do we have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And there are none opposed. All right, moving on to old business. Old business number 1 is the College Township budget, and we have 2 resolutions there as well.
That's correct. If there were any questions on the presentation that was provided of the 2024 budget during the public hearing, I'd be happy to try to answer those. We also have Amy Kerner, our Public Works Director, and Don Franson, our Township Engineer, who worked worked a lot on the budget. Well, along with Mr. Long and myself. So we should be able to answer any questions that are outstanding.
All right. Any questions, council? Rich?
No, I think
Eric?
enough info
Nope.
provided.
None?
None.
Okay, I don't have any either. So anybody want to take a stab at it?
There isn't a recommended motion in the packet, at least there's not one that I see. Am I missing anything?
I think it could be as simple as move to approve
All right,
the
move to-
resolution number.
We've already advertised, so it's really just move to approve. All
Yep.
right, I move to approve.
The resolutions. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a resolution. Is that what we should be approving?
Approving.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, why am I not seeing
It's
it?
at the back.
It's at the very end.
It's at the end.
At the end of the PowerPoint? All right, it's not at the end of my PowerPoint. That's the last slide.
That is part of the resolution. That was the second part of the resolution.
Gotcha.
Go up a couple pages.
Got it?
I can read it.
Yeah, why don't you just read
I'll
it
just do
directly?
that.
out.
Okay, Resolution R2329, resolution of the College Township adopting the 2024 budget, whereas College Township is a township of the second class, whereas township is required by the second class township code to adopt a budget before the end of the year, and whereas proposed budget was adopted on November 16th of '23. The proposed budget was advertised, public hearing was held on December 21st, 2023. Now therefore be it resolved, the College Township Council hereby adopts a budget for the year 2024, providing for $10,266.54 in total revenues and $28,764 in total expenditures, in the amount of $1,762,218 will decrease reserves, providing an ending combined fund balance of $1,724,069. Additional budget detail is provided in the 2024 budget document and made part hereof by reference.
I move to adopt resolution R-23-29 as described by our ordering manager.
Do you have a second?
Second. Oh,
All right, we have a motion, it's been seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, none opposed. We also have another resolution for tax millage.
Right. Similarly, Resolution R-2330 is a resolution of the Township of College fixing the tax rate for the year 2024. Be it resolved and enacted, et cetera, et cetera. The tax rate for general purposes in the sum of 1.85 mils on each dollar of assessed valuation, or the sum of on each $100 of assessed valuation.
yes.
I'll just read the first one. 1.85 mils for general purposes. Debt purposes, 1.11 mils. Fire protection purposes, 0.70 mils. Road machinery purposes, 0.40 mils. Parks and recreation purposes, 1.37 mils. For library purposes, the sum of 0.67 mils. And we have a summation of that on the second page of the proposed resolution that essentially stipulates the same amounts for a grand total of 6.10 mils total tax assessment for 2024. That is the contents of resolution R-29. I'm sorry, 2330.
Does anyone wish to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, so I can put the manager out of his misery, I move to approve resolution R-23-30.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. And we have none opposed. Motion carries. All right, on to old business number 2, which is the COG 2024 budget, which is resolution R-23-28. Do you want to just read
Mr.
this
Chair,
one
I
for the
got
record?
this, I got this one if I can, please.
All right.
Mr. Chair, resolution of the Township of College, Center County to approve the 2024 COG budget. Whereas College Township participates in the Center Region Council of Governments, and whereas each of the participating municipalities are required to review and approve the COG budget annually, now therefore be it resolved that the Council of College Township approves the Center Region Council of Governments 2024 budget in the amount of $27,268,481, with local shares equaling $9,474,929, of which College Township share not to exceed $1,665,983.
Okay. Anyone wish to second that?
I'll second.
All right, does anyone wish for discussion?
Anyone can do the easy ones, Rich.
Yeah, pick
I'll
your
call a
shots.
question. I'll
Pick
call
your
a question.
shots.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, there are none opposed. All right, moving along. OB3, which is workforce housing, answers to planning commission questions. Back to planning commission. All right.
Lindsay, I think you're up.
That's me, thank you. So as a result of the joint meeting, it was decided that the council liaison is to report to council any questions that the planning commission may have. So this is kind of that first effort to do this. But out of request from council, staff prepared some answers to those questions that were just suggestions for council. So we're looking forward, staff and the planning commission are both looking forward to hearing what you think about the proposed answers. And I'm just gonna go through the questions quickly, and then we can talk through those if you like. So the first one is, how does the township, and these are all regarding workforce housing and the proposed ordinance and the remand letter that went to the planning commission back on November 21st. How does the township plan to offer realistic incentives to developers and bankers to construct single-family workforce housing? Number 2, regarding owner-occupied units, how do we maintain the 60 to 120% area median income in resale? Number 3, clarify bullet number 1 to recognize social economic diversity in neighborhoods. What does this mean in more detail? Number 4, how do we prepare for changes in the AMI, or area median income? And number 5, does College Township have any percentage in mind for amount of workforce housing in the township? And further, what is your goal for the next few years? So these are the questions that the Planning Commission has come up with as per our discussion of the remand, and now they are in front of you with our suggested answers. So we look forward to your input.
Excellent. So let's just take one at a time. We'll start with number 1 as discussion and questions and comments. Eric, you want to lead out?
Yeah, first of all, I support this response. I thought it was understood, your response would be understood as what we were looking for from the Planning Commission, but I think you articulated what we thought, or at least I thought, was understood, that is what we want back from Planning Commission. I think it's in line with Planning Commission's role. At least it was the 15 years I was on there. So I fully support the answer and as written in number 1, but open to any hearing what other council members have to say.
Could you read the answer,
Sure.
please?
Yeah. Okay. The suggested response is the current workforce housing ordinance, while inclusionary in nature, nevertheless provides a number of incentives as outlined in the ordinance. These incentives provide the developer with options that reduce site design and infrastructure requirements and allow increased development density. As part of the Planning Commission's review, these existing incentives should be evaluated to determine if they are appropriate and do not inadvertently limit development of neighborhoods with equitable basic amenities. Beyond the existing incentives, council is interested in any recommendations that Planning Commission may have related to potential incentives that support development of additional workforce housing. For example, the township could consider a set-aside amount for first-time homebuyer programs, which is done in another local municipality, or utilize a fee in lieu to pull funding to further incentivize future development through offsetting of infrastructure costs.
Lindsay, if I could add, I also understand that much of this is crystal balling, but that's what we do to the best of our capability.
Well, I think it's crystal ball, Eric, but also believes there's an economic reality. Developers are going to put their money into something that they get something back and make sure they get their profits and they get their markups. And so all we're asking is, it would be nice, and can I get a copy of that? I think
Yeah, absolutely.
that it'd be very clear that there are some positive incentives, possibly meeting with developers again and making sure that, this kind of is encouraging, I think is perhaps an important step.
I believe there's also some overlap between this one and the answer when we get to number 5.
Okay.
And
Any other council member? Eric, are your comments good? Rich, do you wish to make any comments on
I want to
that?
revisit this subject when we hit number 5, because there's some
Okay,
there's
perfect.
overlap.
Yeah, any
Yeah.
other council members' comments on number 1?
I would just offer a general sense of some of this. I think we were attempting not to paint Planning Commission into a corner.
Right.
In telling them, this is what you're gonna do. We've recently gotten in trouble because it was perceived we were doing that. So we certainly don't wanna do that here. I agree, there is a crystal ball element of it, but the reality of it is we put the stuff on the street and see how it works. We recently had a successful response to that with the rental program and on Hilltop and everything. So that's a great example. There's other examples where we came back and we changed the ordinance the next month. So it's kind of uncertain in that and everything, so.
Rich, I understand that, and I think I agree with that. The one thing that comes to my mind is that we have to be very careful that we allow the marketplace to really be able to interject their demands upon workforce housing. And so I think we are, and of course we have one member of the planning commission is in the banking profession. And so we would just want to make sure that there's enough incentives there. You can throw it out on the street, but maybe you can throw it out with some idea of a little bit more of what you might get back.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
If I could just follow up that, I get it, yeah, I mean,
I know you
in business, we always talk about, you know, we don't want to make a blind leap of faith, but most of them are vision impaired. And the only thing I would offer, a banker's perspective and a developer's perspective are not always aligned.
No kidding.
And throw a design professional in there, it's a whole nother side of it and
Oh,
everything like
really?
that. But yeah, if we could have a feedback loop on that, but historically, we've reached out on this subject. I know at least twice in my time on council, and everything, with marginal, feedback on that.
Well, I
and
think
everything.
also
But that
that-
doesn't mean we stop.
Yeah, Rich, I think the other component that we're thinking about is the Dale Summit area as a whole. And that is that we're not just talking about housing, but we're trying to have development of that whole area. And that is the same question of incentives for private property to go into some type of development that starts to reflect what's on that wall. So it's really it's a mixed thing. It's
Sure.
Yeah.
right across the board.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'll go next, you know, in general for number one and throughout. I again would echo the trying not to stifle innovation, right? So, you know, it's almost as if like kind of answer your own question, right? Number one, like come back to us with some proposed incentives to how to make that happen. You know, think about that and that's kind of how I would come at that. You know, we've given you some feeder examples now and hopefully that helps to clarify. Susan.
Yeah, I think my comments will echo what the three of you have already said. But I was actually confused by the question or the asking of the question because I thought that's what we were asking you to tell us. And also understanding that you might rely on staff to help guide thinking in this area. I certainly defer to members of the PC and council who understand the market, the building market in this area better than I do. And so what was important to me was understanding that the incentives that had been offered in the original ordinance could interfere with providing affordable housing that is equitable. And so it might impact the infrastructure that the developer might build. It might not be as equal to or equitable in terms of how it would fit in with the other development in that particular area. So those were my concerns. I think when I understand the importance of what a banker will do approaching something like this and what a developer will do approaching something like this, but I think we're looking at trying to see this differently. You mentioned crystal balling, and there's so many things to think about, but it's important not to get bogged down in the historical process, because I think we're trying to move away from how we have done things historically, and we're trying to look innovatively at how we'll develop, in particular, the Dale Summit area, but also make affordable housing, workforce housing available in the area. And I can speak to this in my work for one of our larger employers for the health system. Many of the people I work with simply can't afford to live near where they work. And whether we decide, as we did with Aspen, coming back to question 5, 10% of the units at Aspen are set aside for workforce housing. I can't imagine picking and locking into a certain percentage today, but trying to think less about the obstacles that get in the way and referring back to how do we work with our developers. again, without trying to interfere with business in the region, when we started talking about the PRBD, my first concern, even as a newest member of council at the time, was that if we didn't take on the discussions around the PRD and the PRBD, that we would signal to developers that we were closed for business during the time we were transitioning and looking at our vision for the Dale Summit area. So that's quite a few different things said all together, still putting my own thoughts together, so I appreciate your patience and offer that for consideration.
Yeah, I think one of the discussions that came up was just a simple design thing, such as most of the units are one bedroom. And when you're trying to, make sure that these units will be desirable for people to perhaps move back into the region, maybe a 2-bedroom unit. Now, that's so much in the weeds and detail, but it's one of those things that you have to look at through your incentives, because you know it's going to cost more to make 2 bedrooms than 1 bedroom. So we have to try to encourage, where's the goal? I mean, what is the need for these people that want to perhaps live closer to the environment? Would 2 bedrooms be a desirable thing if you had a child or you had a parent or you had someone, an elderly? So some of the planning commission members were thinking along that line. Are there incentives that we could think about to expand the opportunity for people to come back in rather than just a single bedroom? I understand at Aspen, you still have some vacancy up there. Well, there's still 1-bedroom units. And
So
they should have filled up immediately.
that is, to my thinking, from what I understand, that is in the weeds in terms of looking at the intent and purpose statements of an ordinance. And so how you would give guidance and recommendations to council on those intent and purpose statements would give us the opportunity to develop the tools to answer those specific questions with developers. But if we're seeking, while we're doing this, to answer those questions with this, I think we're flipping it upside down.
Well, he might be right. I don't know if I agree or disagree, but I think that I'm listening.
Thank you.
That word listening, I am listening.
I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thanks, Bob. Anthony, on the response.
No,
suggested response.
Thanks, Bob, for listening. And that's key, that, to my earlier comment. But not to belabor it, I think it's just been said here in your response, that conversation back and forth. The question, how does the township, well, again, council's remand letter is asking PC to look into these things, and you had suggestions that were thrown back, but that could have been done at the PC meeting, but yet we're reviewing this again to maybe possibly give, I'm not sure what type of understanding, because I'll go back to making that one comment. When you start a conversation with crap, there's not going to be any dialogue.
Okay, so Adam, please. Yeah.
I have some comments. The first thing that I think everyone needs to remember, recognize, and understand is that the existing workforce housing ordinance is an inclusionary ordinance. That means there isn't an option to provide, under certain circumstances, affordable housing, workforce housing, attainable housing. It is a policy decision of council that is represented in the workforce housing ordinance, that it is an inclusionary ordinance. It shall be done. And I'll throw back to a time long ago, well before I was an award-winning manager, when I was a community development director and I was in charge of code enforcement. And people would ask about the codes and the policies that were set by the municipality that I was working for at the time. And I reminded them that our job was to enforce the ordinances and the policies of the municipality. Our job was not to find a way to make money for those that are doing the things that resulted in those codes and those policies. My point here is that the issue at hand is for Planning Commission to evaluate the existing ordinance as it presently stands. It's an inclusionary ordinance that is not triggered unless and until there is an exceedance of density. That's the way that the ordinance is structured right now. That is one of the reasons why over the 15 to 20 years that this ordinance has been on the books, our first and only project that has actually triggered the use of the workforce housing ordinance was the Aspen Heights project. And the fact that the 28 units were all single families, to be honest, I think that was an identified need in working with other entities that are involved in workforce housing projects that assisted the township in guiding the developer in the type of units that were going to be built. That ultimately was a developer decision to offer those units. That's not necessarily something that, in my opinion, that the Planning Commission needs to concern itself at all with. The Planning Commission does not need to concern itself with the design of the units. The Planning Commission does not need to concern itself with how these units are going to be financed. The Planning Commission needs to be concerned with the actual ordinance, the structures of the ordinance, the policy that the Township Council is trying to implement here in providing various forms of housing attainability based on income, and identify potential incentives that can be incorporated into the existing ordinance that can help to facilitate and to maximize the availability of those units by making the construction of those units more sustainable for those that will develop. That's what this ordinance is about. We are not, in my opinion, if we get into a debate at the Planning Commission or at council level relative to a bank is never going to finance this, we're never going to do this, it shouldn't be in these neighborhoods, all of that, to be frank, I think is completely counter and irrelevant to the existing ordinance that is in place now and is contrary to exactly the type of thing that the council has remanded to the Planning Commission to review. So I think it's incredibly important that those benchmarks be observed and understood, and that we don't backslide into a debate about something that, quite frankly, is not part of the existing ordinance, which is a policy-related ordinance. This is what council has determined that it wants to have done. Planning Commission is being asked to revisit it. Primarily, the principal pieces that need to be reviewed have to do with the incentives that are presently existing in the workforce housing ordinance. Those are old incentives. They're 15 to 20 years old. They no longer work. Sidewalks on one side of a street, which is an existing incentive that we have right now in the ordinance, is not going to fly in this day and age because it becomes an equity issue. Okay? That's the type of thing that we're looking at.
Parkland, I think, is another one that's been
Pardon me?
identified that could be an equity issue.
Yeah, exactly, and parkland as well. Initially in the ordinance, and as it's structured today, parkland is not required. That is an equity issue that is no longer in 2023, 2024, something that is going to hold up. And those are the types of things.
Thank you. Very, very valid points and point. So, based off that, council, I want to ask, and Adam, got my juices flowing and thinking, and that's why I want to ask that, right? And we look at it and we say, what's the purpose of the ordinance? I mean, I would, from Adam's response, would suggest that number one is the township doesn't, right? The suggested response would be, we don't plan to offer realistic incentives, and, essentially that's not part of this ordinance or the purpose of it. Is that, essentially what, what you're making, Adam?
It is. I think it's important to offer incentives that can ease the burden, but this is an inclusionary ordinance. It is a requirement. And again, it's a requirement triggered by density.
But these incentives, if we were to offer them, would not be part of the ordinance. It is not.
Well, they are part of the ordinance, but to frame the question, and to your point, to offer realistic incentives to developers and bankers.
Yeah, that's crystal ball.
It's
outside.
irrelevant. It's irrelevant. It's a policy document.
Yeah.
I think that was my point, that it's flipping it upside down.
That was a lot to take in, Bob.
Sorry, Bob.
How you
No
faring?
response needed.
Yeah.
Well, I do have some responses, but I think I'm trying to think it through.
Yeah.
It wasn't meant for a response. I didn't sense that Adam's
Yeah.
comments were
No, I think it,
intended for a response tonight. It was as much to help us stay on task with our evaluation of the answers as it was for planning commission.
Yeah, and look, let's be frank here. This is to review the suggested responses. Does not mean we have to take action on the suggested responses tonight either. So we can't, we can deliberate on this.
So let me ask then, without getting into that again, Adam. I know you're very passionate about this, but my message back to the planning commission, quite frankly, is real simple, that look at the old incentives, try to see if there's any, critique them, see if there's anything new that could be offered.
Okay.
One. What's two? Any two? Just one?
I think you also need to look at
I
how
mean,
the.
except for Wording and Smith, that standard stuff.
You also need to look at how those incentives affect the quality of the workforce housing that will be available. So if, to your point, if the incentives include one-sided sidewalks, that is not an acceptable incentive anymore.
Or reduced parkland, or, right?
Right.
So the equity issue, to your point, this is an inclusionary ordinance, and so the housing that will be available will be equitable.
Right. So are the current incentives equitable?
And the current incentives
Yeah.
in the ordinance as it is today are not.
Yeah. And what could be made, what suggested revisions to those incentives would make them equitable, and then are there any new incentives that would you recommend?
And maybe one way to approach it is to look at first evaluating how do they impact the equity of the development, and if they don't, simply remove them, and then determine whether there are other incentives. I think that's what I would be asking for, is once these are removed, what incentives can be placed, if any, that would provide for the inclusionary building of those developments?
So maybe it's just a little clip of Susan's comments off of CNET.
Yeah.
You can summarize Adam's comments and then just direct PC to Susan's comments, because she did a pretty good.
Yeah, I think so too. I get behind that. Other
That
members.
takes you off the hook a little bit.
Adam, did you have a?
so you have your one, okay, with the enhancement that Susan has provided. If you're looking for a second, one of the things that is in the ordinance now that needs a little more depth, okay, is a dual track approach to workforce housing. One being rental, one being single family.
Right.
Yeah, home ownership.
Exactly.
Okay.
Owner occupied.
All right, thank you, owner occupied.
That was there.
Because while both exist at the moment in the current ordinance, okay, the rental component, ironically, which is the only component that we have present in the township at the moment, was a bit of an afterthought, but it fortunately was inserted there. That allowed us to work with Aspen to do what was done. But there is a little more depth that needs to be added to the rental workforce housing program. And likewise, it's a dual track. I mean, it's either a rental workforce or it's a owner-occupied workforce. The owner-occupied workforce is the one primarily there, where the incentives are going to be the most important piece of the conversation. The rental, it's still important, but I think Planning Commission needs to prepare to have a dual track ordinance, both rental workforce as well as owner-occupied workforce. And I think that's something that needs to be clarified within the context of what we are presently working
So
with.
council, thoughts on Adam's latest comments? Thumbs up? Yeah, 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 head nod, yeah. Any further thoughts on number 1? Do you got what you need? Bob?
Yeah,
Okay.
I do have to say, though, that one of our major concerns is single-family occupied and the regulations on those, because it's a whole different chemistry, socio-economically and everything, and so,
Okay. We ready to go to number 2?
oh, shoot.
All right, so how do we maintain 60 to 120% area median income in resale? The suggested response, affordability, is safeguarded through deed restrictions on owner-occupied properties and through developer agreements for rental properties. Council, thoughts on this? Anthony?
I think it was all covered and
Yeah.
Adam referenced earlier. I'm okay with the response, this is the suggested response, and I believe everything was covered.
Susan?
I think, again, I'm emphasizing the same point, but this is in the discussions we would have with developers based on the language of the ordinance, not something we would want to build into the language of the ordinance. So I agree with the suggested response.
Okay. Rich?
I agree.
Okay?
Yes,
Eric?
but I'm okay with the
Yeah.
suggested response.
Yeah. Deed
that's
restrictions, yeah, I'm okay with it too. Yes.
That's the surest way to ensure it,
Yep.
is that they go with the land,
Yeah, that's how it's currently set up.
Yeah.
other than owning the land and doing
Yeah,
what
that's
you're
where
saying.
that's where the confusion.
But is that something that's included in the ordinance, or is that something that would be included
No,
in the development
that's more of
plan?
a statement that if we want to have public policy, then you got to put public dollars into it and make it happen. But when you're pushing for requirements on the last guy to the game, there's a balance.
Thank you.
So Bobby
See,
still
there
look a
was
little
an
confused.
uncertainty in our part about when you sell
Sure.
the unit, how do we keep those same standards up?
Yeah, and again, I think that the answer under number 2 absolutely addresses that.
Yeah.
And again, as a quick refresher, College Township Council has contracted with Center County Housing and Land Trust. There's a memorandum of understanding that the county land trust is responsible for maintaining the income viability of existing occupants of the workforce housing units that are in College Township. They verify those each and every year. When those units turn over, they have the same responsibility year after year after year. The other thing to keep in mind is the period of affordability within the existing ordinance is 30 years. It is not 99 years, as in a number of our other adjacent communities here in the center region. It is a 30-year period of affordability. And by virtue of the contracts and agreements, the developer agreement, as well as our agreement with the land trust, we're able to sustain that viability for that affordability period.
Okay.
I believe Ferguson is also 30.
Yeah, Rich, you
Just a question, do we require notes on land development plans referencing?
We do.
Yes, we do.
There
Yeah.
are notes on the Aspen plan.
Right, so that puts a restriction on,
That may be
as
a good
well.
addition. In addition to the developer agreements, that there are land development approvals require memorialization of obligations related to workforce housing and periods of affordability.
Okay. Further comments on number 2? None? Bob, good? Taking some notes? We'll let you catch up a second. All right, moving on to number 3. I'll read while Bob's writing. So clarify bulletin number 1, to recognize social economic diversity in neighborhoods. What does this mean in more detail? Just to draw you back down, bulletin number 1 is down under the intent statement. That's number 1. That's what they're referring to, I believe.
Yes.
Yep, and then so the suggested response in there, I'll just read it aloud again. To clarify, council is seeking development of communities that are comprised of individuals with varying socioeconomic statuses. Some factors contributing to socioeconomic status include income and education levels and occupation. The goal is to ensure that new development in College Township is not narrowly focusing on any one socioeconomic class, but instead fostering inclusive neighborhoods. Inclusive neighborhoods provide equitable opportunities for individuals to have affordable housing that is proximate to their respective places of work. Okay, so that's the suggested response. Comments or, further clarification on that suggested response? Susan, you want to go first?
I knew you were going to ask me. I'm still a little confused
Okay,
about the
so
bulletin. So
Yeah, go ahead, check out the bulletin, take
Yeah,
a
let's
second. Yeah, you ready?
I was
Rich?
gonna say, the first thing I would say is that identify what we believe we're responding to, which would be that, as you're suggesting, bullet 1 under the intent statement.
Yes.
Correct.
Identify that in our response. This is what we're responding. If we're responding to the wrong thing, then our answer makes more sense.
Yeah, Bob, I guess we'll
got
ask
it.
that
I'm there now.
clarification from your point, right? Is that what it is, the bulletin, when it says clarify bulletin number 1, is it number 1 under the intent statement? Where it references socioeconomic diversity?
Yes.
So that bulletin number 1, yeah, recognize the importance of socioeconomic diversity in nurturing more inclusive and dynamic neighborhoods. Yep, and then Lindsay shaking her head, yes.
Yeah, that was the reference to
Great.
number one.
So if we can just, the response is we're responding to bullet number 1. I don't know bulletin,
Yeah.
what that refers to, but
Or I
bulletin
would
number
just say
1
number
under
one
intent.
under the intent
Under
statement.
intent statement, because there were a couple
Ones.
there's a 1 under objectives.
Yeah.
There's a 1 under suggested tasks, so let's just, make sure that we're identifying the question we believe we're answering. And then with regard to the response, I'm completely comfortable with the response itself.
So I guess, there's some evaluation made as to status, income, education levels, and occupation. In other words, if to get diversity, you would have to look at all those components and say, just take education. Or, what's the matrix?
Yeah, go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, there is no matrix. Let me finish. There is no matrix. This is an ideal. Okay?
Sure is.
It's an ideal. The key to all of this is AMI, average median income. This is a income-driven policy. That is what makes a workforce housing ordinance function. All of these things that we're talking about, inclusivity, socioeconomic diversity, dynamic, those are objectives and ideals. They're not measurables. They should not be measurable.
Just asking the question.
They
because
cannot
I
be
didn't know
measurables.
that.
And I understand that, please don't take any of this personally.
No, I wouldn't, you know.
And because it's not intended that way. But I think it's incredibly important that the planning commission understand what we're dealing with
Well, now
here.
that you said income driven, that's the major parameter.
That is the
Underline,
parameter that we're
period.
using.
I don't think that we knew that.
Yeah, well, yeah,
Oh.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think though, that if we use that range around the area median income, we will encompass a lot of what's being teased out under the suggested response. That would include a diversity of people with different education backgrounds, all the things we're talking about in there. So I think that range allows for, I think if we concentrated on making this available to all people with, between 60 and 100% or something, I can't think quickly, but you understand what I'm saying, so.
Yep. That's possible. It's a hypothesis, it's, maybe it'll happen, but it's income driven, and so that's your directive. Okay, I got it.
Anything else?
No, I was just
a concern of any time we try to social economic engineering is a folly.
Which is why it's not part of
Yes.
the ordinance.
And Rich, that was in some of the documentation that we
Yeah.
got,
Yeah.
social, economic, and
No, it's a consideration.
that's something that I
but-
studied a lot of
Yeah.
in college, and
Yeah,
I got real scared about that.
yeah.
Yeah, good, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, the intent, it's what the intent we would like to see, but we have to use the measurable actual data to achieve that, right? Yeah, got it. Is that
I'm with
fair?
you.
Yeah, and, yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Eric, anything?
Yeah, what we're referring to, that Adam called ideals, I think there is a little bit of room for judgment when we go back to number one, and we use sidewalks and parks as an example. So I think you look at those things, take your best shot, say, we can't offer less parkland now. I think you're covering some of that ground by doing that. By saying we can't say only sidewalks on one half of the road. Parkland's probably a better example.
Yes,
So I think you'll get some of that by just doing the exercise in number one, and I think that's all we can expect at this point.
Yeah.
Is to say, we can no longer offer parkland, reduced parkland, because that clearly is a socioeconomic issue if we do that. And that's the best I think we can ask for you to do, and then that's all we would
Yeah, it's
ask.
a quality of living.
yeah. I think our overriding goal is to prevent any social economic disadvantage.
Disparity.
Disparity. Disparity is probably a better word, yes.
No,
Yeah.
I'm with you there.
Yep, great.
Yeah. Okay, so we're ready to move to 4? All right. How do we prepare for changes in the AMI? Suggested response. The area median income is a statistical measure used to assess the relative income levels and economic conditions within a specific geographic area. And the Department of Housing and Urban Development establishes the AMI on an annual basis, and it uses it as benchmark to determine income level limits for various housing assistance programs. It's historically not been dynamic, rapidly changing measure, and so nevertheless, College Township will need to continuously monitor for any changes to the AMI and adjust the AMI thresholds within the ordinance
Fair
to
enough.
accommodate.
Understood.
Yep. So just an ongoing beat on that
It's a
one.
dynamic study.
I think that's at the heart of this whole exercise, is
Yeah.
that we want to expand back, just another example would be federal minimum wage. That doesn't work today. And so AMI potentially we deem that AMI is not working as current, or we could do better on that. I think that was an underlying
Okay.
intent of the whole exercise.
And I'm understanding correctly that the AMI is calculated at the county level?
Yeah,
It
it's
is.
countywide.
Yeah,
That is
okay.
correct.
Further comments, anyone? Number
just-
5? All right, hang in there, Bob, we're almost through it. You almost got it. All right, number 5, does College Township have any percentage in mind for amount of workforce housing in the township? And what's the goal for the next few years? So our suggested response as provided by staff is, while the intent of the ordinance is to facilitate the provision of affordable and attainable rental and owner-occupied workforce housing options within College Township, council does not have any preconceived percentages or a specific target for number of workforce housing units to be developed over time. Council will entertain any recommendations that Planning Commission wishes to provide on this topic. Yeah, I'm pretty on par with that. Anybody? Any questions?
I would just offer enough.
Yeah, enough, yeah.
I mean,
Not 0. Yeah,
I like the idea of, I don't think we can set one, but maybe this. We do this already, we're crystal balling here, but maybe instead of a goal, 2 years, every time we get a plan that trips this threshold, we look at it and we say, did we get what we thought? So I like the idea of a goal, I just don't think we can set a hard, fast percentage, but I like the idea of the goal being, as we develop and approve plans, let's revisit this. Let's revisit the changes that we made, did they produce the results that we want, and if they didn't, Let's take a
Well, I
crack at
think,
it.
yeah, I think, Eric, let's say we get a land development plan for housing and mixed use. And we look at it and say there's X number of rental units because of percentage or whatever is agreed to between the developers and staff and council. But then we're looking at single family owned occupied. And we're trying to think that some of that would be good. How does that enter into the discussion? In other words, is it one of our goals to have single family occupied units? Do we think that's valuable? Just conceptually.
Well, I think it goes back to number one, and what Adam had said, put some of that in place, you know, to start with, and then as it hits,
Measure the success.
measure. So I like the idea of a goal, just not a hard and fast percentage.
No.
But a goal of, hey, did we get out
Did we
of it?
accomplish what we had hoped?
Yeah, and we do that already with ordinances when we take our shot at it, you know, until we get a real plan in with real money, real, you know, somebody else's money.
Well,
Yes.
I think another thing we'll consider over time is as we're developing and we're developing businesses in our township, we'll be bringing in employers who will be bringing in employees who will need workforce housing, and that may change our understanding of the number of units or the percentage of units that we think. we
Number
need to
and
have.
type.
Because we want to create housing options that are attractive to employers, coming back to the work of the IDA. You know, we want to, so I think there's a synergistic relationship between business development and.
Oh, there is,
resident-
definitely,
And so
absolutely.
we'll see that over the next, we'll be looking at that when we look at what you're talking about.
I just want to echo Bob's point, number and type, both matter.
Yeah, so your one-bedroom thing, maybe that's something, if we end up with a bunch more one-bedrooms that we think we don't need, or we didn't need, or the other end of that, then,
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. We hard line it in terms of what we want, and then we're gonna be disappointed because maybe it doesn't work. And so many times we make those hard lines and then we're proven that that was really a mistake. So you're saying go by kind of what the marketplace puts up in front of us. We can evaluate it, judge it, offer suggestions, maybe add some single family or whatever.
Yeah.
And see how it,
that's what I'm suggesting.
Yeah,
as the
during the
goal.
land development plan, right.
it's a design process conducted by staff and council to the proposal.
Okay.
Yeah. The other thing I think is just important to iterate is the fact that owner-occupied units do not have to only and solely mean single-family detached units. In fact, those are probably going to be the most difficult to be able to develop in a workforce housing setting. That said, there are many other types of owner-occupied units, condominiums, townhomes,
Duplex.
duplexes, those types of things. And again, I think that, going back to the whole premise here, it is an inclusionary ordinance. It's only tripped based on density. It provides the opportunity to better integrate those potential types of units into a more dense development. So I think that going forward and conversing and debating about modifications to the workforce housing ordinance need to make it very clear that, yeah, it would be great if you were able to develop a single-family detached workforce housing unit. But you know what? That's probably the most difficult challenge
It is.
in workforce housing. But there are many other alternatives to still achieve the owner-occupieds.
Well, of
Those
course,
are
and
the,
you get closer to the urban areas, you can see what the trend is, not single-family lot ownership. Because it's economically
right,
impossible.
You know, it occurs to me.
That's a trend.
Yes, Susan, yeah.
This is my experience, and I'm coming at it because I work as a healthcare provider. I get a set of clinical guidelines from the professional organizations that do the research on the different diseases that we manage. Those are guidelines, and I think the ordinances are like the guidelines. The guidelines don't tell me what to put someone on or how much to put them on. It tells me what direction I need to go in and why I need to go there. And I think these are guidelines. The ordinances, in my mind, as I'm thinking this through as a new member of council, that the ordinances are the guidelines that we would use. But they wouldn't tell me exactly what to do each time. I'd have to use my judgment and my staff.
All right, additional comments on all of them, responses. Bob, did you get the feedback that you think you needed?
You certainly did.
Okay.
That's some laugh, Bob.
This is one of those, careful what you ask for, you just might get it.
Well, and I think PC
I think it was a
wanted
good
us to have-
exercise.
I thought
Vetted it out further.
I thought
Yeah.
PC wanted us to have a sort of dynamic dialogue and
Well, one thing
exchange, so I
might-
hope that's
might-
this.
I might suggest, we're talking about more joint meetings,
Right.
and that's built into the form-based housing section of it. Might want to think about, when we get through this workforce housing, we come up with that you have members of the planning commission with you as council to kind of smooth it out and make sure that, you know, we're working together on this, because there are some very strong opinions on the planning commission members. And I think we need to try to synthesize it and come out with something we both agree with. According to some of the directives that Adam had pointed out. I'm not sure, but let's think about it. Lord knows we don't need another meeting, but I think workforce housing, in some minds, is very simple. You have pretty strong guidelines right now with your ordinance. But maybe with some of the things that we come up with, should be passed through you before, you know, it gets its final deliverance to you.
Okay.
Period.
I appreciate you coming here and sitting through these 2 hours, Bob, and being the point person for the planning commission.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Well, I've gained a lot of respect for what you do, believe me, and how you deliberate. I think that's one of the things that I have learned.
I think that's something we also pride ourselves on, is the deliberation, the conversation.
Guys are good. Yeah, you do a good job.
Okay, yeah.
Wouldn't
Rich.
you just comment on timing and simultaneous and stuff? I know in my work experience, you know, you move something along and then you gotta wait, and then, so you move something else along and then you're waiting. Hopefully those jive, that everything can be moving forward, and everything. So I almost think that you're gonna have situations like that with the various topics that we're talking about here. That you can they keep jumping around each other as they're waiting for other information in the various places, because staff capacity, planning commission capacity, all that factors into all of it.
Well, yeah, I still came here tonight asking, as representing the planning commission, that we separate our tasks a bit. I think maybe we push back the form base by only 2 or 3 weeks. But I think that we need to get this discussion at the planning commission level resolved into you as quickly as possible.
Okay. Thanks, Bob. Yeah, and we got your recommendation on, well,
And
as
that's
we
a
know before.
recommendation. I think it goes to staff, it goes to council. Tell us.
Yeah, Mike.
Just one point of clarification for staff. So before you tonight was the kind of written response for planning commission. I guess that my question is, do we want to provide a formal written
Yeah, I did
response
want
to
to
the
address that,
questions?
too.
And that's honestly as much to help Bob, because we threw a lot at him tonight. Just to make sure that, you know, council's giving a clear and concise answer to the questions that were asked.
Yeah, and so with that, I think we owe it to planning commission to have a formal written response. And I don't know if you want to, maybe have a conversation with Bob, get some of his notes, make sure we're jiving on what, he wrote down, and then give that cohesive response.
Yeah, I mean, my takeaways from tonight really were the one that maybe has the most edits from what's on, in your agenda packet versus what would go forward to planning commission is number one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The others are pretty close to the point. So what I was going to offer or suggest is that staff can work with collectively, tap into Bob's notes as well.
Yeah.
On refining that, and much like we do with the remand letter, send it to you just one time before the next PC meeting to say thumbs up
Sounds
before
good.
we pass it out as part of the agenda package.
Yeah, I think the one that I was trying to take notes on, but I couldn't do it, was Adam's
Rant?
explanation.
Diatribe.
We'll have to
That's what I thought, diatribe.
His,
we'll have to go back to the video.
his
though.
dis-
It was an award.
his dissertation,
It's a soliloquy.
I
He should be a guest
listened to
lecturer
that,
somewhere.
I couldn't take enough notes.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I'm in the same boat. I think collectively, we probably can capture it from our collective notes as well as the CNET video.
I was gonna say, I know somebody who
Yeah.
might have
So-
really good visual or
I-
audio notes.
My opinion is just appropriate. We provided that to you. It almost serves as a addendum to the remand letter.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, guys, thank you for this very thorough response to our questions.
No, yeah, and again, I echo what, what Eric just said, thanks a lot for, being there and working through it with us. Absolutely.
That's their job.
Yeah. All right,
Anthony?
Thanks, Bob. No, thank you, Bob.
Okay, so unless anybody wants to talk more about that, Adam, no?
I could.
I'm good.
Everybody, all right. OB4, Dale Summit Area Plan Form-Based Code Review of the Process. Lindsay, please.
Okay, so in 2024, we're going to embark on the, the major undertaking of reviewing both the Dale Summit Area Plan and the form-based code prepared by DPZ. So before we launch this effort, we'd like to go over the process and just tell you how we're suggesting we move forward. And that is in a series of joint meetings. So we suggest the first joint meeting be held where we focus on the vision of the Dale Summit Area Plan and the plan itself. That's where we would revisit our past actions from the Dale Summit Area Plan going back to 2021. As you know, DPZ took the Dale Summit Area Plan and incorporated their response into it. And so we need to reevaluate that and then, of course, confirm that the vision statement is still appropriate in how council wants to move forward. And then the second joint meeting, we'll dive into the code. We'll focus on the site analysis and some of the support diagrams that were provided in the code, including the new regulating plan, which will become essentially our new zoning map, and then the draft Dale Summit form-based code document. That's the draft that we would be looking at. We would establish some kind of order in which the Planning Commission and staff would move forward in reviewing the code itself. And then finally, after that meeting, we would ask council to remand the document, the code to the Planning Commission for further detailed review. The joint meetings are really going to be established so we can just have that foundational, establish that foundational understanding that, we're both the Planning Commission, staff and council are all on the same page as we move forward. So the Planning Commission had the opportunity to review this memo the other Tuesday evening. And what we're really looking for tonight is council's recommendation on the process. If you feel it's appropriate moving forward, if you feel the timing is right, and if so, we can move forward with those joint meetings if you feel that's an appropriate time. But I think, when we talked with the Planning Commission on Tuesday, I think the Planning Commission's anxious to see the plan as it has been prepared by DPZ now. And so we would like to get those materials out to the planning commission and to council, before too long here. So the PC did have some concerns, as Bob noted, of the timeline. And so we're just looking for council's input now.
Yeah, okay, so council, input on the timeline as proposed. And again, I understand that, major comments from PC on this were, hey, maybe late January start, push it back a couple weeks. Is that correct, Bob? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I would like to underline, if you don't mind,
Yeah, go ahead.
that we did approve the methodology
Okay,
of how this is being conducted.
so as
It's
far
just
as the
timing.
objectives and the focus areas and all that? yeah,
Yes,
Okay,
it's just timing was the major objection.
okay, thank you. All right, so with that, council, let's go ahead and deliberate on this. Anthony, thoughts, comments, questions?
As the newest exiting member of the council, whatever you guys prefer.
Susan?
So, just so I'm clear, I don't see exact dates. Do we have exact dates?
So if we would be moving forward with a joint meeting in January, on a staff level, we decided, or we discussed that it would be either, between the 5th and the 12th, or the later in the month, the 22nd through the 31st. So sometime later in January. PC meets the 2nd and the 16th. Council meets the 2nd and the 18th. And so we wanted to make sure that we're not doubling up on meetings.
I think if we're pushing it back a week or two, I don't have a problem with that. I would just hate to see this taken apart and delayed. Rich made a good point about having to do different projects, different work, and sometimes having to push it here and stop, and then having to do something else and come back, and it sort of merged. It's hard for me to imagine how we completely tease out workforce housing from form-based code, because the two are mixed together, because one will affect the other. So, I look to my other council members to give some feedback on taking things apart and doing them as completely separate and discrete discussions, and I have no objection to moving back a week or two, the timeline, to give more time.
Yeah.
But no much more than that.
Yeah, I would agree with Susan's comments on, timeline-wise on January. So just to clarify on that a little bit further, right? So our council meeting in later January is the 18th, is that correct?
Correct.
And then PC is supposed to be that 16th?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. So we're proposing, though, the week of the 22nd through the 26th, in addition to those two meetings, not replacing any of them? Okay. All right, and then, I think my overall comment, I'm on board with the focus areas and the meeting objectives. I think honestly, we should just plan for having a third meeting just in case. Just put it on there as part of the plan. Because I do see that second one, I'm just looking at the meeting objectives, and it seems like that one might be a heavy lift in one meeting, or, I don't know how long we want to have these meetings for.
Right.
What are we looking at, time frame wise, and maybe council, we want to say that, do we want to keep them at 2 hours, or 3 hours, or what? Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, and I guess,
Or 8 hours, I'm not a finance person, I'm not used to these really long meetings, so I'm just saying.
I guess a little, peek behind the curtains in terms of the thought process for particularly the first meeting. Staff is absolutely mindful of the point that came up during planning commission. These are two heavy lifts that are going to be hitting at the same time. Form-based code is absolutely that you're playing the long game with form-based code, and to your point, that's probably appropriate to do. Think about that as possibly 2 joint meetings. The thought with that one, and I'll kind of work backwards, the thought with meeting 2 was not to necessarily do the deep dive, but to develop a process for how planning commission and staff should basically fracture that ordinance and look at it in incremental steps. How do you eat the elephant? One bite at a time. And with that, having seen the draft that was prepared by DPZ, I think it's important that they provide some overview of what their thought process was and the why behind their thought process of the development of that form-based code
In the joint meeting.
in the joint meeting. That way, we're all on the same foundation. And
Okay.
then, as you come out of that and are comfortable coming out of that meeting, here's a scope of work for planning commission to then take that ordinance and start breaking it apart. Okay, maybe the first thing you look at is the street standards, and then you work out from there, or vice versa. It really, that will be teased out in those meetings. But that was some of the thought process
That's at
behind it.
number 3.
Yeah,
right?
it's not necessarily to dive into that ordinance and start looking at the nuts and bolts as much as it was, how do we think we can productively break that apart and start moving it forward, move that ball?
Okay.
The first meeting, kind of taking that step back, where staff believes that there's an opportunity to do those things concurrently. So, and I like the idea of a late January meeting for that discussion. That would provide planning commission at least one, possibly 2 meetings where they can jump into workforce housing and really get some traction on that. That first joint meeting is really just a review. When you think back to the actions that were taken on the Dale Summit Area Plan, that 75% complete Dale Summit Area Plan that was done back in October of 2021, it has not changed. What DPZ did was took a new section and dropped it in and said, here's what we did with the charrette process, here's what we found in our markability study, here's how we're moving towards a regulating plan to get you to form-based code. The vision, the goals, the objectives, no changes whatsoever. So, outside of adding 2 paragraphs in the introduction, it's one new section of a plan and that 75% plan. So it's just a refresher course in my mind of, okay, here's where we were. Here's what we were thinking we wanted to do out in the Dale Summit. Based on what DPZ has provided that, in my opinion, affirms and strengthens that vision and those objectives, are we good? And if we're good, now we have the plan 100% definitively in place. Let's start talking about the code.
And you thought you were going to have an easy January. Oh, man.
So you shouldn't let me talk about it. But that, I also watched the planning commission meeting, and I understand the frustration, and believe me, it was frustrating to watch. But that said, I think, that piece of the puzzle needs to be articulated is, with that first joint meeting, it's very much a review, and I think, there's an opportunity to move those 2 balls at the same time. By the time you get to form-based code and actually start doing the heavy lift of form-based code, the hope is that workforce housing has been delivered, or at least some recommendations, that February, March timeframe, so that it clears the deck a little bit for planning commission to then jump into that scope of work that you tease out in that second or third joint meeting.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
Lindsay, any thoughts that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I just think Mike covered it, so we're good. Yeah.
Eric?
I just think, one thing the planning commission did say, they want to make sure that the vision is still the vision. And since it was established, back in 2021, I think that's probably a major part of that first meeting is to ensure that the vision that has been established still is great or good with the planning or with council and how you want to see Dale Summit move forward. So.
Okay. Eric?
Yeah, hearing what Mike just said makes me wonder if you really need to move the January meeting back, because it's really just a review and refresh. However, I don't know what's in planning commission's queue or staff's queue, so I totally defer to the consensus between those bodies. I support whatever you decide. Last weekend in January, fine. I was going to say the same thing Dustin said about 2 meetings. I think it's easier to tackle things in 2 2-hour sessions versus 1 4-hour session. Notice I didn't mention 8 or 6 or anything like that, especially if they're in the evening.
Yeah.
Then the last thing is, if we end up with a second session and we're in charge, are we still lined up with the timeline that DPZ presented? Because one of the things they had distinguished themselves from the other presenters was their shorter timeline.
I'm going to defer to Lindsay to that one, but here's what I have to say. The work that DPZ has done, in my opinion, is substantially complete.
Okay.
That said, there is without question work beyond the substantial completion of DPZ's work that needs to be afforded in the review of their work.
So we're not gonna slow them down and by moving the meetings out, because they're not waiting on us for doing any work. Their work is gonna be as a result of what comes out of our two meetings.
Yeah, exactly. We're gonna be, back and forth, like, right now, staff has already, had the opportunity to work with them a little, give us their input, and, keep in mind too, when we went through the rezoning that we just did, we made that sort of a hybrid, our own hybrid. So I know a lot of folks don't want a pure form-based code, so by allowing, the planning commission and council to look at it and sort of make it their own by making it that hybrid code that we're really looking for. So that's our opportunity then to take it back to DPZ and say, slow down, we want you to do it this way, this way, this way.
So this actually works pretty well then.
Yeah.
It does. And to pick up on a point that Lindsay just made, I'm gonna go out on a limb right here and say that I think it is highly unlikely that College Township ends up with a pure form-based code, a textbook form-based code. In all likelihood, this will be a hybrid code. What that means, what that looks like, is to be determined. But I do know that members of the Planning Commission have real concerns about true form-based code. I personally believe the likelihood of that occurring is virtually nil. I truly do believe that it'll be more of a hybrid version, but again, precisely what that looks like is the whole process that needs to be vetted with the Planning Commission and with council. So if that's helpful, there it is.
We've talked hybrid through this whole process. It's come on, so.
Yeah, you let the process take us where it takes us, right? Yep. Okay, Eric, anything else? Rich?
Nothing to add.
Okay, all right, council staff, anything else to add? Yeah, Mike?
Just one more thing, and I know it was a discussion point that came up during PC about, having a meeting before the joint meeting. I honestly would recommend against that. And the reason is, I think it's important that council and planning commission come in. You can obviously have individual questions. I think it's important that you hear the questions and the answers collectively. So while I understand and appreciate the interest in doing that, what I would urge planning commission is, in that time that precedes, moving toward this first joint meeting, spend it on the workforce housing.
Yeah.
And then when it comes time to have that joint meeting, we'll go all in at that point.
Thank you. Good
Yeah,
point.
so I just want to kind of, did you have something, Lindsay?
I just said, that's a good point. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, so I just want to kind of summarize what I believe, what our consensus is, and, give me the head nod or the absolutely no, I don't agree with that if not. So based off of what is proposed to us in the month of January, we're all in agreement with that later January meeting for meeting number 1. We agree with the focus areas and the meeting objectives as published. And then for the second one, for the second meeting, we're in agreement with, which I assume we would probably vet out in that January meeting, more of the dates in February and March. And we're all in agreement with the focus areas and the meeting objectives there. Is that correct?
So I heard.
Okay. Okay. All right, good to go. Bob, anything for the group? Anything else?
I was just,
No, it's, yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that what we're really saying is we can discuss workforce housing, but you're not approving us to separate them as individual components, but rather part of the process going through 1 and 2.
Well, I think what Mike was trying to say was, we're gonna provide you these documents and you're gonna have 2 meetings between the time you get the documents and we have the joint meeting.
Yes.
And those 2 meetings of the planning commission's discussion should be workforce housing.
Recommendation, you focus on workforce housing for the 2 meetings preceding this,
Okay.
this joint meeting.
Yeah,
Okay.
Correct.
And just to continue building on to that, just, being mindful that the workforce housing ordinance, while absolutely is part and parcel to what we're gonna be doing on Dale Summit, applies across College Township. So, yeah, I just think there's an opportunity there, Bob, for Planning Commission to get some good traction for workforce housing before we jump into what I think is much lighter of the 2 joint meetings.
But you're gonna provide reading materials for us if we have problems to go and sleep now.
Yeah, so to give some background on that as well, the thought was if council was fine with it after hearing Planning Commission's recommendations coming out of their meeting this week, staff is prepared to issue the Dale Summit Area Plan with a transmittal letter that gives some detail of what's changed. Okay, let me take a step back. 3 things. Where have we been? What are the actions that have been taken to this point on the plan? What has changed in the plan, which I talked about a little bit here tonight. And then the third point is some recommendations on how to review that plan in preparation for joint meeting number 1.
Okay.
And if everybody's comfortable with that, we can issue that as early as tomorrow.
Oh, great. Christmas reading material.
Super.
The best one.
It would give you a 1-month lead up.
All right, excellent, thank you. Okay, so I think we're gonna move on from OB4 into no new business. And staff informs, does staff wish to highlight any of the things included?
Very quickly, most of the staff informative is comprised of UAJA materials. I believe that this was their budget season or their budget meetings. There's some references in that. I think there was also some information that was forwarded to council in the form of a PDF related to UAJA's budget itself. So if there either the documents in the packet tonight or any of the accessory material would be able to provide you some insights and some information pertaining to their budgets.
Okay. All right, thanks. All right, counselor, staff, other matters. Anyone? All right, do we have a motion to adjourn? Anyone all at once?
So moved.
All right, so moved. And I'll second.
Wait a minute.
What? Anthony. Last,
Before you adjourn,
yeah, last meeting.
Motion to rescind the motion to adjourn.
Yeah.
you thought you were gonna get out.
Yes.
So we do have an other matter. Yes. Okay.
Anthony, take the floor.
Yeah.
Last comment, last
what-
meeting.
So it's been my
Till the next
pleasure, to come back and work with this council, meet Susan and work with Susan and Dustin as well. I don't think I've worked with Dustin.
Yeah.
It's been a privilege. And again, I truly support what council's been doing to keep this community a great place to live. I think that's what we all volunteer for. Staff, I can't speak well enough of the staff. I just sent a note out to somebody the other day. They say volunteer positions are thankless, but, I think it takes away from what staff does to make these volunteer folks look good or presume they know what they're doing. Staff does an excellent job, and I thank them for the support. I thank, again, council for the support, and the support in me. And again, I'm just glad to have been here and help, and move forward. Thank you.
Here, here. All right.
Hey, I want to thank Anthony for stepping back to the crowd. He's so good, we have a tendency to take him for granted. Anthony's back. We don't need to, it's just business as usual, It was helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, sir. Thanks a lot. Okay, so now we still have a motion on the floor to adjourn, so we will adjourn.